Halo? Halo? Mbak Dila masih di-mute.
Ya, kamu di bawah?
Iya.
Halo. Ini belum semuanya ya, apa? Presenternya. Oh iya, udah ada Pak Priyo. Halo Pak Priyo. Selamat siang. Halo, Assalamualaikum. Selamat siang, Bebe dan Pak Priyo.
Selamat siang Mbak Dila.
Ya, ini nanti masing-masing presenter bisa sampai 20 menit ya. Jadi karena panel kita cuma ada 3 orang, waktunya bisa lebih panjang gitu. Cuma kalau mau 15 menit juga nggak apa-apa, dia 15 sampai 20 gitu.
Oke, noted Mbak Dila.
Pak Priyo? Panitia, Pak Priyo udah tes mic belum ya? Halo? kita menunggu peserta yang ketiga. Mungkin dari tadi nunggu di admit beliau, jadi siapa tahu sedang ke belakang. Tadi join presentasi di panel sebelumnya nggak, Bebe?
Yang panel Law and Society saya malah nggak join, Mbak. Cuman yang keynote saya join. Kemarin juga saya join.
I see.
Kalau yang Law and Society tadi saya nggak bisa masuk, nggak tahu kenapa kok tulisannya password kayak passwordnya salah atau gimana. Cuman saya bisa dengar Mbak Arum dari ruangan sih, kan Mbak Arum juga moderatorin yang panelnya Bu Melin kalau nggak salah. Bukan yang panelnya Pak Dekan sama Mas Igam, tapi panelnya Bu Melin. Saya bisa dengar dari ruangan.
Oke. Jadi nggak perlu nonton ya. Oh ya, link untuk YouTube-nya udah ada belum ya, Panitia? Mungkin nanti bisa di distribute di kolom chat gitu.
Kayaknya bisa di copy di itu sih, Mbak. Itu kan di atas kiri ada tulisan live on YouTube itu. Kita bisa copy.
Oh, ada linknya ya?
Oh bisa di copy to clipboard. Nah itu.
Oke, udah di-share. Makasih. Kita tunggu sampai kapan ya, Panitia? Untuk yang presenter ketiga, ada batas waktunya nggak? Pak Priyo, halo. 3 menit lagi kita mulai ya Mbak Bebe dan Pak Priyo.
Siap, Mbak.
Ya.
Nanti yang bicara duluan siapa ya Mbak Dila?
Oke, urutannya nanti dimulai dengan Nabila, kemudian setelah itu Pak Priyo, video Pak Priyo, berikut yang terakhir Mbak Lesda dari Universitas Negeri Manado.
Kalau Pak Priyo video, berarti beliau sudah merekam. Oke.
Udah direkam. Selamat datang Mbak Hana, Mbak Indah. Jadi nanti sesi Q&A-nya bisa jadi lebih panjang ya. Karena kalau yang di sudah di-set sama panitia kan 30 menit. Kalau kita karena ada 3 orang, kalau semuanya datang ya berarti kan 1 jam presentasi bisa 1 jam Q&A gitu. Tapi nanti kita lihat aja seperti apa perkembangannya.
Berarti lebih dikit nggak apa-apa ya Mbak ya presentasinya? Saya khawatirnya
Ya makanya
agak panjang.
20 menit lah di recording 10 menit. Selamat datang Mbak Rizky. Oke, udah 13.30. Halo Pak Priyo. Belum ada respon. Oke. Karena waktunya sudah menunjukkan pukul 13.30, tandanya kita sudah bisa mulai, berarti nanti presenter yang belum hadir, tapi ini sudah sesuai dengan urutannya sih, jadi insya Allah bisa lanjut sampai Pak Priyo gitu. Kalau yang untuk Mbak Lesda, itu karena live berarti ya kita perlu nunggu ya nanti. Oke, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to 2020 Symposium on Social Science, Rethinking the Social World in the 21st Century. I am Fadilatul Hikmah. I am pleased to be your moderator for today's symposium for panel B4. I am a lecturer at the Faculty of Law of UGM, and I'm very excited to be hosting this afternoon session. Before we start with the presentations, allow me to explain about this session and the rules. First, this afternoon's panel will be available on YouTube, and it is accessible through the link as has been distributed by the committee in the tab chat. So I believe everyone already received the link. And secondly, the committee allocate 15 to 20 minutes for each presenter for their presentation. And I will hold up a card or a sign warnings when the time is 5 minutes left and also 1 minute left. And as this panel only consists of 3 presenters, that means the presenter might have the time for the presentation up to 20 minutes each. And thirdly, we'd love to hear also from the participants about the presentation. So if you have questions for the presenters, please feel free to send it through the tab chat, and we will be answering all your questions at the end of the presentation session, the whole session. Lastly, to all participants, we kindly, humbly ask you to mute your audio, especially during the presentation. Okay, distinguished presenters, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, I'd like to kick things off by welcoming our first presenter, Mrs. Nabila Rizfa Izzati. Mrs. Nabila, hello.
Hello.
Yeah, so she is a lecturer at the Faculty of Law of UGM. She is my colleague. She is from Civil Law Department, and she will present her paper on mitigating employment crisis during COVID-19 pandemic, evaluating Indonesian policies through international labor standard. Throughout her paper, she studied the Indonesian labor policies regarding COVID-19 pandemic and evaluated whether the policies in line with international labor standard. Mrs. Nabila, the time is yours.
Thank you, Mrs. Fadila. Thank you, Fadila. It is my great honor to be able to talk about my paper in this conference. This is actually the first time I'm presenting the paper. I already did this paper around since the beginning of this pandemic, and I did some of the online survey as well. So, and this is the first time I'm actually telling public about the result of the paper. So it is my great honor to be able to do that. I would like to share my PowerPoint here to make it easier. Okay, so is it showing yet?
Yes.
Okay, wait. Okay, so just like Mrs. Fadila already mentioned, that my paper is talking about how evaluating the Indonesian policy through international labor standard. I'm writing this paper because, as we know, that this sudden pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic, is affecting a lot of aspects of our life. Social, economic, developmental, everything is affected. But one of the aspects of life that I think is very much affected is how we're doing our work. Because from the employment perspective, this pandemic is actually a game changer. There are a lot of things that are changing on the way we're doing our work, and this pandemic is actually can cause an employment crisis. So it is the government job, the government responsibility to give certain policies, to make certain policies to make sure that the employment crisis is mitigated. Maybe it's still happening, but it's not happening like that much. So I would like to evaluate several policies that our government made, because Indonesian policies itself is criticizing over the policies during COVID, because compared to other countries, we don't really do well. But I won't talk about a lot of policies, all of the policies that the government is having. I will be only focusing on 5 policies that are related directly to with the employment sector. So if we're looking at the background, if we're looking at the background of this, we can say that COVID-19 is actually affecting a lot of things in the world of work. First is the work from home policies. Since the beginning of this pandemic, the government is telling the employee to start work from home policies. This is something that's new in Indonesia. Research from World Bank stating that actually only 21% of job that we're doing can be done by work from home in Indonesia. So this sudden shift is in conducting work is affecting many workers and company. And when the national government in the last March, in the end of the March, declare health emergency and passed the regulation allowing individual regional government to apply PSBB, to apply large-scale social restriction. This large-scale social restriction also caused a lot of business stop running because the PSBB regulation asked the business to not be able to. Some of the business, for example, in Yogyakarta, a lot of business concerning the tourism stop running. And of course, it also caused workers losing jobs temporarily or even permanently. In the April 2020, the official record from the government stating that at least 4 million workers in Indonesia is losing job, whether it's temporarily or permanently, and it's on April. Back then, when we thought that this pandemic will be over in a month or two, but turns out it happening until now. So of course, the number of the workers who's losing job, I think, is way higher than 4 million. So that's how it's affecting the world of work. And the recession in the quarter two of economic perspective of economic of Indonesia is minus 5%. If in the quarter three it's minus again, that there is a big possibility of recession. And if we are talking about recession, there is also a possibility of employment crisis because a lot of business stop working, a lot of people are like losing the job, etc. And International Labour Organization itself stating that COVID-19 pandemic will at least impact the world of work across 3 dimensions. The first dimension is about the decrease of quantity of the job. So the quantity of the job will be less than before the pandemic. And not just the quantity, but also the quality of the job. The quality of the job, as in like the wages, the access to social protection of the job will also be decreasing because of this pandemic. And the third thing is the pandemic will also affecting specific group who are more vulnerable to adverse labor market outcomes. For example, for workers in informal sector, we see that they are more affected towards this pandemic compared to other types of jobs. So that's how COVID-19 affecting the world of work. And because of this, of course, the government should do something. There are several things that the government should, but it's not easy because the government will always be putting in a difficult position about they have to protect the economy, but also they have to protect the workers' health. And because it's not easy, one of the compass for labor policies in terms of employment sector, I think, is international labor standard. Because international labor standard is a legal instrument that drawn out by ILO constituent, and Indonesia is one of the ILO constituents since 1950, which set out a basic principles and the rights of work. So in order to make the government's policies easier, like we actually have international labor standard to mirror our policies. Of course, not everything must be perfect, like as in the international labor standard, but by looking at the international labor standard, we can actually see whether the policies is decent enough with the decent work standard that the international society have. So because of the two research questions that I will be try to answer in this paper is the first one is what are the policies that are made by the Indonesian government to mitigate the employment crisis, and whether this policy is in line with international labor standard. Because of that, I have two different separate findings. The first finding is Indonesian labor policies response itself. So if, as I mentioned that currently Indonesia, even though a lot of people criticizing the way government responds on labor, on COVID-19 pandemic, but currently there are numerous regulations that have been issued by the Indonesian government regarding various aspects of this pandemic. Of course, the health sector, the economic sector, they have so many regulations. But in this, I will only be focusing on my analysis on these 5 policies. Because why? Because I think these 5 policies currently maybe we will have another policies, but currently I think that these 5 policies is the policies that has direct correlation with labor, with employment sector. So that's why I will only be focusing on these 5 policies. I will be talking about these policies one by one. So the first policies that I'm evaluating is the government regulation in lieu of law, or Perpu number 1 of 2020. This is becoming the basic fiscal policies in the Indonesian in the Indonesian policies regarding pandemic, because this Perpu number 1 of 2020 provide additional state budget allocation around 405 trillion rupiah to the following sectors. So some of the sector is like to the health sector, and then social protection, as well as tax incentive. And why I think this Perpu is correlating with labor policies, because these policies is recognize the need to increase the social safety net based by the Keluarga Harapan program, as well as Kartu Sembako program that are talked by these policies. I think this is in line with the labor policies regarding the social safety. And this regulation is also giving additional budget for pre-employment card or Kartu Prakerja. It doubled the budget to 20 trillion rupiah. And this policies is actually shifting the Kartu Prakerja back before pandemic. Kartu Prakerja objectives is for like fresh graduate who's about to find a job, etc. But now the objective of this Kartu Prakerja shifted into workers who's recently lost the job. So based on these policies, based on the new policies on Kartu Prakerja, any workers who recently lost the job because of this pandemic can access the Kartu Prakerja and got incentives in around like 3.5 million per card holder. Not all of it is in cash, because some of the are incentive for like getting a program for like for what is that called, like pelatihan, something like that. And there is also tax incentive for workers in the manufacturing sector with annual income below 200 million per year. That's why I think this has a direct correlation with labor policies. The second policies is the Minister of Manpower Circular Letter number 3 of 2020 concerning worker protection and business sustainability in context of preventing and control of COVID. Of course, this has direct correlation because this comes from Minister of Manpower. And the main idea of this circular is basically 2 things. The first one is to make effort to prevent the spread of handling COVID-19 in the workplace. And the second idea is to implement wage protection. So based on the circular letter, any workers who's considered as ODP, PDP, or COVID-19 positive should be protected. The wage should still be protected. And for companies who restrict business due to PSBB, due to COVID-19, if they want to change the rate of the wages, etc., it has to be done with the consultation with the workers. So it cannot be one-sided from the company, because of the company cannot do business, so I cannot pay your wages. It cannot be done like one-sided, but it has to be done by with talking to with the employee. However, it is worth to note that the circular is not legally binding, because this is only surat edaran. This is only surat edaran. It means that it only serves as guidance for a company. And another thing to note is this Minister of Manpower circular letter is given to gubernur. So it kind of like a bit confusing. What's the objective of this circular letter? Because it's not the circular letter is not given directly to the business owner, but to the governor. So the Minister of Manpower telling the governor to make sure the business do the circular letter. So that's the second policies that I think correlated. The third one is Minister of Manpower circular letter regarding THR. This is quite similar with the previous circular later, because this provides leeway for a company who cannot pay the THR to be able to pay the THR gradually. So you cannot pay the THR right now, but you can do it gradually to save the business to collapsing because of the need to pay THR. And the other policies that I think is also very important is Minister of Health decree regarding guidance for mitigation and control of COVID-19 business in office and industrial workplace. This Minister of Health decree basically issued to support the sustainability of business during the pandemic, because PSBB and work from home cannot be done forever. Not all of us are like lucky enough to be able to do the work from home. So if the companies need to open to run the business again, at least the companies needs to do that by maintaining health protocol. And this decree is setting up those health protocol. So obligated workers to use face masks, etc., etc. So this is why this is correlated with labor policies. But this decree itself does not stipulate specific sanction for a non-compliance, because the decree just stating that the local regulation can get their own sanction if they want to do it, and not all of the provincial government follow it up. I think that only like around 10 provincial government that nowadays have a sanction relating to health protocol in the workplace. I will be talking about that later. And the last policies that I think is also correlated with labor policies is Ministry of Manpower circular later regarding the protection of employee against COVID-19 through the work accident. And this circular issue to ensure that high-risk employee receive work-related accident insurance. So if you're working in the health protocol in the health work, so you need to be able to get an accident insurance. Oh, I just realized that it's only 5 minutes. So I have to go through the second finding. So whether this policy is in line with international labor standards or not. To evaluate that, I'm looking at the 4 pillars of ILO policies framework based on ILO labor standard, which the first one is the policy should be stimulating the economy and employment. The second one is the policy should be supporting enterprise jobs and incomes. The third one is the policy should be protecting workers in the workplace. And the last one is whether the policies rely on social dialogue for solution. The first pillar is stimulating the economy and employment, and this is quite clear. We see that from Perpu number 1 of 2020. So because many analysts argue the Indonesian government top priority is actually to protecting the economy, so most of the policies is actually in line with this first pillar. So I think we don't need to discuss more about that. And the second pillar is still related to the first pillar, which is about supporting enterprise, jobs, and incomes. The Perpu number 1 of 2020 is actually also in line with this because they give expansion of social protection, they give a tax incentive, which actually in line with the pillar of supporting enterprises, jobs, and incomes. So for the first and second pillar, most of the policies in Indonesia, we can conclude that it's actually in line with the labor with those 2 pillars. Things got quite interested in the third pillar, because the third pillar is about protecting workers in the workplace. And if we're talking about this third pillar, the Minister of Manpower circular later and Minister of Health decree, we can assume that it is in line with this pillar. Because if we're looking at these three policies, there are things to appreciate. For example, there is obligation for business to maintain health protocol in the workplace, which is in line with Occupational Safety and Health Convention. There is also protection of wage for workers who have contracted COVID-19, which is in line with the sick leave policies that are regulated in the Convention of the Medical Care and Sickness Benefit. And there is also policies for high-risk employees to receive work-related accident insurance, which is in line with Employment Injury Benefit Convention. So most of the policies that we have is actually quite in line and needs to be appreciated because it tries to protect workers in the workplace. However, there are things that needs to be evaluated. For example, it is worth to note that there are none of these policies is actually binding towards the employer, since all the policies only serve as a guidance. It means there are no sanctions that are applicable for a business who don't comply with the guidelines. And it proves that these policies are ineffective because, for example, in the Jakarta district region itself, there are reports that are saying that there are at least 90 clusters of in the office workplace. It means that a lot of health protocols that are happening that are stated in the policies itself is not be done effectively. There is also evaluation concerning no gender perspective in the policies that we are having. Even though the Employment and Decent Work for Peace and Resilience Recommendation Convention calls for applying gender perspective when there is a crisis as pandemic right now. And to see that, I did an online to evaluate that even further. I did an online survey from 20 July to 3 August 2020. I got around 400 respondents from almost all provinces.
Ms. Nabila, sorry for interrupting. Your time is almost up. Can you please conclude your presentation?
So 2 more minutes to show that this online survey stating that most of the companies actually not doing the health protocol very good. Because, for example, there are only 50% companies that are implementing physical distancing in work. And it means that only 50% of workers who feel safe enough in the workplace during COVID-19 pandemic. And it shows that a worker feels that the risk of being exposed to COVID-19 is increasing because they go to work. It means that the health protocol that should be the protection of the workers that should be done by the companies is not done effectively. So all of the policies that we appreciate in paper turns out to be not really good in reality. That's basically the conclusion of this of the third pillar. And the fourth pillar, I will skip this because I think it's quite clear. Many companies carried out mass layoff unilaterally, so there are not really good social dialogue on doing while this pandemic is happening. So the conclusion, I would like to wrap up this with the conclusion that when we're talking about employment policies in the pandemic, the government needs to adopt policies which are not only good for stimulating the economy, but also protecting the workers' right. And most of Indonesian policies in paper is in line with ILO's 4-pillar policies framework. However, most of these policies are only good at paper because the implementation itself is still far from expectation. And there are evidence that the protection for workers in workplace during COVID-19 pandemic is still lacking because most of the workers don't feel safe enough to go to work, and there are a lot of workplace cluster happening. And there is also not yet any labor policies regarding COVID-19 pandemic with a gender perspective, as well as not yet specific policies to support stronger collective bargaining. So therefore, it's not in line with the social dialogue that the ILO's convention is having. So to conclude that, I think that there are still a lot of things that needs to be evaluated on how the government making an employment policies in regards of this pandemic. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to more discussion about that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Nabila. What an interesting and fruitful presentation that you just shared with us. Thank you very much. All right. Now our next speaker is Mr. Priyo Hadi Susilo from Indonesian Air Force. He's currently a doctoral student at UGM. His presentation will be about legal perspective on Indonesian Air Defense Identification Zone, or IADIZ, and the concept of regional ADIZ. His research shed a light on the lack of basic norm concerned with ADIZ establishment, which lead to various state practice and inconsistency related ADIZ determination. As a consequence, it could potentially bring up state conflict and even violation of international law. According to Mr. Hadi Susilo's research finding, a multilateral agreement as a form of regional cooperation helped conceptualize regional ADIZ. So without further ado, we will have Mr. Hadi Susilo's presentation. It has been recorded, and I humbly request the host to screen the presentation, the recorded video. Welcome to the participants who just joined the session. Now we are about to start the second presentation by Mr. Priyo Hadi Susilo.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to say thanks for the committee of the Symposium on Social Science 2020 for the opportunity to me to present my paper. My topic is about the legal perspective of Indonesian Air Defense Identification Zone, or IADIZ, and the concept of regional ADIZ. And before we begin, let me to introduce myself. I am Priyo, Gadjah Mada University doctoral student, Indonesia. Now, I will start from the scope of my presentation. First is definition of ADIZ, then ADIZ as a state practice, and the concept of Indonesian ADIZ, and the legal problem of IADIZ establishment, and the last is conclusion. We will start with the definition that Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ, is one of the special regime in the airspace as a support for the country air defense. The first purpose of the ADIZ establishment is, of course, for national security, in that to protect the country from the threat of the airborne air attack. In the Cold War era, in the US and the USSR is fear with the strategic air attack from intercontinental ballistic missile. But now the ADIZ is transformed after the 9/11 attack from terrorism action. So the purpose now is to protect the airspace with the misuse of civilian aircraft in the weapon. If we look into the definition from the expert, ADIZ is a zone with civil aircraft must identify themselves and may be subject to air traffic control if they intend to fly from non-sovereign airspace into sovereign airspace. So ADIZ is also special designated area of non-territorial. So basically, ADIZ is established in the non-territorial, in the jurisdictional territorial, where the state impose reporting obligation on civil and military aircraft. ADIZ existence is not regulated in any convention, nor has it become international customary law. Why? Because the state practice of the ADIZ establishment is still have many variations. And if we go to the chopper control theory that airspace of a country is based on the way the country control or manage the airspace. And if we refer to the Article 51 UN Charter for the self-defense, is for about a self-defense, and this is a one of the mean of the country self-defense. And now we go to the next slide that this is a state practice. Why here I highlight the discrepancy, because the state practice of US EDIS and Canada EDIS and also ECS EDIS or East China Sea EDIS in the lately of 2013, there is so many different for the state practice. We start in US. The US ADIS only requires aircraft flying within ADIS to turn on the radio and transponder, carry out two-way communication, and confly flight plan to the air traffic service. And the special character and that the US exempt to aircraft that not entering national airspace. But in contrast to the ECS IDs that requires foreign aircraft to report themselves to Chinese aviation authorities when only passing, that the aircraft is not intending to go to the national China airspace. And if the aircraft not comply with the requirement, the Chinese armed force will provide a defensive emergency measure action. Besides that fact that the establishment of ECS ADIS, many presume that the Chinese government maintain its position or strengthen the dominance on territorial claim because it covers disputed island with Japan on Senkaku and Diaoyu Island. And with South Korea is with the Suyan Reef and Leodo Reef. That the China tries to exercise administrative control so that it includes the realm of sovereignty. That in aviation, sovereignty refers to the ownership of airspace. In other words, it is the exclusive competence of state to exercise its legislative, administrative, and the judicial power within its national airspace. Next, we go to the Indonesian ADIS. This is the existing Indonesian ADIS. It's published in Air Information Publication in September 2006. And now Indonesia want to reposition its existing ADIS with the legal basis of Republic of Indonesia Government Regulation number 4 concerning the national airspace security of 2018 in Article 14. State that ADIS establishment is inside the territory, means in the national airspace, and also the outside territory in the jurisdictional area in the economic exclusive zone. This is the table of the different situation of the state practice or discrepancy of the state practice among the US ADIS, ECS ADIS, current Indonesian ADIS, and Bangladesh ADIS in the Asia. This is the different ADIS obligation in every country because there is no legal basis or convention of the ADIS establishment. And this is the new concept of Indonesian ADIS. Is in the whole of the economics exclusive zone of Indonesia. So from the legal basis, that is can be established outside in the jurisdictional area over the economic exclusive zone. And then this paper is only focused on the economic exclusive zone area along the Natuna and Rio Island. Why? Because this is mainly related to the high value of the Natuna and the context of the country territorial sovereignty, strategic position, especially in the freedom of navigation in order to ensure the smooth flow of the trade, world oil, or SLOC, sea lane of communication, and SLOT, the sea lane of oil trade. Beside the Natuna Water and Rio Island are the entry point to the essential choke point in the Malacca Strait. That is a very strategic point in Indonesia. So the paper only highlight in this area. So now we will discuss about the potential legal issues for the EADIS establishment over the Natuna and Rio Island. That there are two potential overlapping norm with first Singapore Fair Arrangement and second with the Malaysian Access and Communication Right, and also concern about border dispute. The Malaysian Access and Communication Right is from East Malaysia to West Malaysia. First thing that we have to elaborate is to for Singapore Flight Information Region Arrangement, that the history of the delegation of Indonesian airspace to other countries began when the regional air navigation meeting on 1973. The meeting was agreed that the Singapore managed the airspace above the Natuna and Rio Island for the altitude of 20,000 feet. So with this, Singapore has the legality to enter Indonesia Flight Information Region area without the permission from Indonesia, that only need sufficient Singapore air traffic control permission. In contrast, Indonesian aircraft must obtain the permission from the Singapore air traffic control in the flight information zone that controlled by the Singapore. This obligation also applies to the Indonesian government aircraft, including Indonesian military aircraft that will conduct security patrol and presidential aircraft. So with the implementation of EADIS along the economic exclusive zone, especially in the Natuna and Rio Island, will be an overlapping norm with the Singapore Flight Information Region Regulation, where the reporting obligation when entering the area is to Air Traffic Control Singapore. Indonesia cannot force it to comply with the norm set forth in the reporting obligation in its IADIS, as well as the several requirements on aircraft entering the ADIS. So that the implementation of IADIS in this area will be useless. And then the second problem of the implementation of IADIS in this area is related to Indonesia-Malaysia bilateral agreement related on access and communication right that signed among the two countries on February 25, 1982, that the Republic Indonesia and Malaysia grant access right to aircraft and government ship, civilian ship and aircraft, and traditional Malaysian vessel through the Corridor 1 and the Corridor 2. So that the legal consequences for the state aircraft and civil aircraft to conduct uninterruptedly, fast and unobstructedly flight through the Corridor 1 and 2 that have determined between West Malaysia and East Malaysia, including military aircraft. So, with the ADIS establishment in this area, there will be additional reporting so that the Malaysian ship and also plane cannot use the right of access and communication right for the previous bilateral agreement. Not only this problem, the two countries, Malaysia and Indonesia, also currently in the process of resolving land borders, which are included in the outstanding boundary problem. Finally, 3 points for conclusion. First, lack of the legal basis or international convention related to ADIS has the result of inconsistency on state practice determined ADIS. Second, regarding to the concept of repositioning ADIS, several spots potentially lead to the legal issues with neighboring country. One is with the Flight Information Region arrangement with Singapore, and two is with the previous bilateral agreement with Malaysia related to the access and communication right. Last, the concept of non-unilateral ADIS with the regional cooperation as a step forward to maintain the regional peace. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Priyo, for your presentation. I will say that the presentation has really broadened my perspective and also the participants' perspective on international law, especially on air territory security. So we will have further discussion later on. So if you have questions for Mrs. Nabila or to Pak Priyo, please write down your question in the tab chat. All right, last but not least, our presenter is Mr. Lesda Leonardo Lombok from Universitas Negeri Manado. So Mr. Lesda will be presenting a paper on principle of non-discrimination in the World Trade Organization and its challenges to Indonesian sovereignty. He shows that the principle of non-discrimination as part of WTO rules had a significant influence on Indonesian sovereignty through the development of its trade, changes in provisions of applicable law and protection programs in Indonesia. He also introduced the concept of multilateral pooled sovereignty, a strategy that can be done to strengthen Indonesian sovereignty. So indeed, another interesting topic regarding one of the renowned international organization. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Lesda Leonardo. Mr. Lesda, over to you.
Okay, many thanks to the moderator. First of all, I would like to thanks for this opportunity because this is a chance for me to share my thoughts from my dissertation actually. This paper is small part of my dissertation that recently just finished. and to be presented in the last test of my study. Okay, first of all, I will introduce myself. My name is Lesa. I'm from Universitas Negeri Madrid. I'm also a student at Faculty of Law of UGM. Let's start first. Why I write this paper, the small part of my dissertation. It's because of my concern about the principle of non-discrimination itself. WTO is a vital organization, of course, in today's world trade. On the other hand, relations between countries at the international level, such as the WTO, do not lead the country to become a protector for their citizens because the developed countries' intimidation, involvement of countries in various trade negotiations, such as the Green Room meeting at the WTO. Is it fair and transparent, the WTO rules? WTO rules actually aim to create a stable and predictable trading system for its participants, aka the WTO members. The question is, who are the participants? The concept that always exists in every agreement and negotiation at the WTO for the participants. This is my brief explanation about what is the principle of non-discrimination. You can read it later on my paper. And how about Indonesia? The biggest problem, not just for Indonesia, but also for a lot of countries, is the sovereignty. It is a controversial concept under international trade. In Indonesia, for Indonesia itself, it is reflected in the last case about Indonesia import licensing regimes. We lost. And Indonesia needs to change some local rules, such as Permendak or Trade Minister rules, Permentan, rekomendasi impor produk horticultura or horticultural import recommendations. In this case, Indonesia is considered to discriminate against New Zealand and the United States of America. The most affected areas, of course, are food as a result of Indonesia as agricultural state. So, is it good or bad? The principles of non-discrimination itself. Indonesian sovereignty is constantly challenged in world trade through the principle of non-discrimination. But the fact is, principle of non-discrimination is the biggest foundation in international economic law. So, there are conditions to implement the principle of non-discrimination. That is reciprocal conditions. Is it useful? That's why this kind of study needs to be carried out so that in the end, Indonesia can use it to formulate a legal strategy to maintain and even project sovereignty in international trade negotiations. Problems, I formulated the problems in my paper. The biggest problem is to what extent do the principle of non-discrimination in various WTO arrangements affect and strengthen Indonesia's sovereignty. I want to highlight my literature review about sovereignty reinterpreted. That is from my supervisor, Professor Dr. Sigit Rianto. He said about multilateral pool sovereignty is a sovereign states act together in ways which the sovereignty of each country is held together through bodies, institutions, organizations, and networks, both formally and informally. I used three theoretical frameworks for this paper: erga omnes, relational sovereignty by Helen Stacey, and agency theory by Jan Wouters and Philip Mann. So the first conclusion I take from researching disputes in dispute settlement body WTO. You can see in my explanation, most favored nation, there are 4 cases, and national treatment, there are 5 cases. The implications, I conclude, there are 5. First, principle of non-discrimination implication is there is an intensive negotiation between WTO members in terms of how the disputing countries deal with it after the dispute settlement body decision, both the panel and the appellate body were issued. Usually, it resulted as a mutually agreed solution as the best deal. It was happened in the case of EC bananas tree, US clove cigarettes, and Japan alcoholic beverages too. Second implication is changes to domestic regulations of member countries. It happened in the case of Indonesia Autos and Korea alcoholic beverages. In the end, in Indonesia Autos, Indonesia changed its national car policy with a new policy that was in line with the principle of non-discrimination, especially the most favored nation. Third implication is changes in the implementation of domestic regulations by member countries. This appears in the cases of European Union footwear, Colombia ports of entry, and Canada autos. In this case, it appears that the member countries initially have a special trade regulation. However, the implementation of this regulation was sued by other countries because it was considered to have violated the principles of non-discrimination, which was later decided by the dispute settlement body. The fourth implication is changes in part of the contents of domestic regulations by member countries. This change is due to the fact that only a few articles are deemed by the WTO dispute settlement body that contrary to the principles of non-discrimination. The fifth implication is the birth of new trade agreements, which is seen in the case of EC bananas tree that resulted a Geneva Agreement on Trade in Bananas between the European Union and Latin American countries. There are also implications of principles of non-discrimination to WTO members that resulted from the Doha Development Agenda. I concluded there is 3 of it. First, postponement of implementation of the obligation of the agreement mandated in the negotiations. Second, waiver from the implementation of existing obligations. And the third, renegotiation of agreements that have been reached continuously until the structure of their economy is able to implement it. So, what is the implications for Indonesia? Of course, in food sector. I researched the cases and matters such as Indonesia chicken, in dispute settlement body, of course. Second, Indonesia import licensing regimes. And the third, from matters from Doha Development Agenda that resulted July package and Bali package. First, in Indonesia chicken, actually, the matter cited by the complainants was TBT, SPS, and import licensing. The principles of non-discrimination related in this case is only the national treatment regarding Indonesian national standards through halal certification. And Indonesia succeeded to uphold it because it applied equally between domestic products and foreign products. So through this case, Indonesia actually maintained Indonesia's food sovereignty, at least in the application of certain certifications of standards for a product. In the second case, about Indonesia import licensing regimes, Indonesia was declared to have violated 18 provisions. In this case, Indonesia lost and have to change various provisions for foreign products that enter the country. So it could be concluded that we lost. How about implication of principles of non-discrimination to Indonesia from Doha Development Agenda? Indonesia, as a development country in Doha Development Agenda, is given an opportunity at a certain time to fulfill various obligations to reduce or eliminate tariffs on foreign products. These actually can be used as an opportunity for Indonesia to prepare itself as best as possible by restructuring the economy to be even better to face these various obligations. How nation on Indonesian trade laws? There are about 13 legal materials that I researched for this matter, and I conclude that almost every regulation I researched has an element of importing goods from abroad by following the quality standard applied by the government of Indonesia. In this case, principles of most favored nation and national treatment remain in effect both between business actors from abroad each other and between business actors from abroad and domestic. My conclusion, I concluded that first, the principle of non-discrimination has major implications for the trade in goods of WTO members in various aspects. Secondly, the principles of non-discrimination has a positive and negative impact on Indonesia. In a positive light, Indonesia can still apply its national standards as long as they are applied equally to domestic and foreign entrepreneurs. Negatively, Indonesia must change its various domestic regulations for products from abroad. I conclude also, the third, the strategies that can be carried out by Indonesia to overcome principle of non-discrimination are only to minimize the negative impact of the principles of non-discrimination, not to completely avoid its effects. That's all. Many thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lesda, for firstly for completing your dissertation and also for your presentation. It was very interesting perspective on the fundamental principles in World Trade Organization. So now we will move to question and answer session. So for the participants of this panel, if you have question, please feel free to write it down in the chat tab. There's still no question yet, but I think the questions not only for the participants, but also for the presenters. If you have a question to other presenters, you are very welcome so that it could enrich this panel's discussion. Yeah?
Ms. Fadilatul,
Yes.
I actually want to ask to Ms. Nabila Rizwa Izzati.
Yes, Pak. Please.
Okay, thank you. Actually, recently, I have a friend who has problems about not a friend, my aunt actually. She recently almost got fired from her company because of the pandemic, of course. The company tried to reason about her hiring situation. They stated that there are rules in Indonesia that provide some sort of power for the company to fire my aunt, even though my aunt already worked there for about 20 she almost enters enter her what is it called, pension age. She almost enter her pension age in about 1 or 2 years more. If the company fired her, of course, she will never receive her pension compensation. Am I right? if the company able to fire her. So my question is it true? There are regulations from the government maybe or from whoever about a power for the company to fire their
Employee.
their most loyal employer. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Pak Lesda. Mbak Nabila, you want to directly answer the question?
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you,
okay.
Pak Leza. It's actually a very interesting question because this is the types of problem that we see nowadays, especially during the pandemic. Because as I mentioned, that one of the policies that the minister, the policies that the Minister of Manpower gives to during the pandemic is to make sure that that the firing of the workers not becoming the first thing that the companies do. So the circular later is actually pretty clear, stating that based on our current regulation, so the current regulation of manpower is Undang-Undang Nomor 13 Tahun 2003. So based on Law Number 13 of 2003, it specifically stated that firing a worker should be the last resort. So actually, in Indonesian employment law, it's not that easy to fire a workers in Indonesia. There are a lot of things that need to be done prior to firing. For example, like there has to be bilateral talk. Bipartite talk between the employer and employee, and then there has to be mediation, and there have to be so many other things that need to be done before firing the workers. And that's not changing in the pandemic. The circular later is actually clearly stated that the companies needs to be anything before firing. So firing should be last resort, especially for workers. But some of the companies using, because in my understanding, your aunt is almost in the pension age. It means that she's pretty senior in terms of age. Some of the companies using this as a reason to fire workers a lot of times in the pandemic, because they feel they put it in a way that makes sure that seems like they're nice, as in like, because you're old, I want to protect you to make sure that you're not coming to work. Therefore, it's better for you to be just like staying at home by me firing you. So actually, there are no policies whatsoever that are stating stuff like that in the labor policies that we are having. So that's just an excuse that the companies use to fire the more senior workers. So the policies clearly stated that the senior workers need to be protected, as in like in the health matter, not being able, but it shouldn't be a reason to fire a senior workers. But it happened. That's why I stated in my presentation that in reality there are a lot of things in the policies that cannot be done, because the oversight of the government regarding policy regarding labor policies is very lacking in this pandemic. So everything is based on the goodwill from the business owner. I mean, like, some of the business owner is nice and want to do everything that they can. Not all of them are evil, but we have to admit that some of them are pretty evil. So that's what makes it quite hard when we're talking about labor policies. Like, as a labor lecturer, people keep telling me like, the economy cannot be running without the business owner. We need the business owner. You cannot we always antagonize the business owner, because some of the business owner is actually nice people and they're doing everything that they can in order to protect the workers. But we have to admit that that not all of them are doing that. And that's where the government's policies matter. Like the government needs to do something in order to protect the workers because of this imbalanced position. And I think that's what lacking in this pandemic. The things that the government do to protect the workers is lacking because we cannot just put everything in the hand of the business owner. Like it's hard to be a business owner in this pandemic. Therefore, the government needs to help, and that's what I think it's lacking in the policies. That's my insight. I hope it's quite clarified. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Pak Lesda and also Mbak Nabila for the answer. But I think before we move to the next question, I would like to follow up Pak Lesda's questions with another question, Mbak Nabila. As you mentioned that this whole thing about government policy through circular letter, they are not binding upon the companies, right? So my question is, firstly, what will be the consequence for the countries who fail to comply with the international labor standard? Because you mentioned Indonesia has fulfilled on paper, right, the regulations, the policy, but they don't actually implement it well. So is there any consequence for the countries? And also regarding Pak Lesda question, when the company actually has a good reason or a justification for firing their employee, will they be protected under our existing law as for the good companies that you mentioned? Yeah.
Thank you, Mbak Dila. So regarding the first question, this is actually something that's also quite problematic with international labor standard, because international labor standard only serve as a guidance. Because there are two types of international labor standard. The first one is convention. It means that if it's a convention, you ratify the convention and it become your national law. It means that you're bound with that convention. But the second type is recommendation, which is like only serve as a guidance. Most of the international labor standard that I mentioned in my paper is actually a convention. However, this is a convention that Indonesia itself hasn't been ratified. So Indonesia is not really in a frontliner in the ratification of international labor standard. Overall, we only ratify around nine international labor standard over like almost 100 international labor standard that ILO have. So when we haven't ratified the convention, if we're talking about the legal consequences, there is no legal consequences. Right. It's just something that, because it's in more like international law, it's just something that makes you not really in a great benefit in the eye of the other countries, because like as you know that when we're talking about employment policies, the government keep telling about RUU Cipta Kerja, whose one of the sole purpose is to make sure that there are good investment coming to Indonesia. But the things that the government seems to forget is that maybe the investment is not coming not because we have a strict labor policies, but but on the other way, it's because we have a lot of hole in our labor policies. And that's where international labor standards become matter, because this is like international standard. So if you are keep up with that standard, then other people for other countries will think that you have a solid ground of labor policies in your countries. But if you are unable to adapt with international labor standard, people will question your labor policies. Like, okay, maybe your labor policies is not really like in line with human rights, or it's not really in line with other things. So that might be the consequences that I thought. And concerning the second question about the companies who actually justified to fire someone because of this pandemic, because I mean, like if the company stop running, of course you have to fire your workers. Like you cannot can't keep having a workers if the business is not running. But there is no clear policies regarding to that. So it means that from the Minister of Manpower, what I understand is they said that if you have to fire a worker during the pandemic, then the law that are applicable is the applicable law. It means that the firing consequences is the same as in other things that happen even without the pandemic. So all the rights and the obligation from the companies and the workers is what it mentioned in Law Number 13 of 2003. So there are no specific policies yet regarding firing, regarding like the different compensation that you got if you got fired because of this pandemic, and if you are not getting fired because of this pandemic. So legally, the company still need to give the benefit to the worker as in what the Law Number 13 of 2003. So the pesangon, tunjangan, and everything still have to be the same as in like the Law Number 13 of 2003 stated.
All right. Wow. Thank you very much for your explanation, but Nabila, yeah, that means we still have a lot of homework for strengthening our the protection for our workers in Indonesia, right? So questions from the participants, probably Mbak Hana Aulia, Mbak Indah Retno, or maybe from other presenter, Pak Priyo, or Mr. or Mrs. Keycom, right there. Questions? But Nabila, probably, do you have any questions for other presenters?
Not yet. I will think about it.
Okay. Right, because we still have plenty of time for question and answer session. We are still waiting for your question in the chat tab. But meanwhile, I guess I will address another question for another presenter. For our second presenter, Pak Hadi Susilo. Are you there, Pak? Hello.
Yes, hello.
Yeah, hello, Pak Priyo. Halo, Pak.
Hello.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. Yes.
In my office, so because here is not good in the internet connection because it's near to radar and radio. Yeah, so
I see. Right. Yeah, we understand perfectly your situation, but it's good now that we are connecting, right? And I think, yeah, your presentation was very interesting and very broadening our perspective on international law.
okay.
I have a question regarding your presentation. So you explained about overlapping norms in Indonesia, in Singapore, and in Malaysia regarding the ADIS, right? So my question is, based on your research from other experience, from experience in other countries, for example, how do they actually settle this kind of overlapping norms? Do they settle it by bilateral agreement, bilateral negotiation, or is there such a multilateral agreement ongoing or prepared by the international organization?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for the question. That now, before I answer that, I have to underline that previous Indonesian air defense identification zone, or also that practice in the other country, was the unilateral action. So I think this establishment is only based on the national security need, I think. But the development of the state practice, it's now this is only state that into the nation that only for the purpose of the air defense identification zone. So I think we must change for now that this is not only the unilateral action, but we must set it into the multilateral or bilateral action. I give an example on my paper that we have overlapping norm with Singapore and Malaysia. Why? If we declare ADIS, especially in the Natuna airspace or in the Rio airspace, that the airspace on the Rio and Natuna is still controlled by the Flight Information Region of Singapore. So I think our establishment will be useless. Why useless? The special obligation for aircraft to entering ADIS is to report to the air traffic control, report their position, their altitude, their heading. But we don't have that obligation because it's still controlled by Singapore. So I think this is the most important thing that we have to take our control of airspace in Natuna and over Rio. As I said previously, that we have two corridors that we have delegated to Singapore, Corridor 1 and Corridor 2. From President Joko Widodo have taken back the first corridor, but the two corridor is still in control with the Singapore. So I think in the future, if we have, if we want to declare or ADIS or reposition our air defense identification zone, we must to take control the air navigation that being controlled by Singapore. And the second is with Malaysia is related with the previous bilateral agreement that Malaysia have the right to communication and access from East Malaysia and West Malaysia. So I think the two main potential problem, I don't state it is the problem, but the potential problem from the legal perspective is if the two main problem is not solved. So related to your question, until now, ADIS declarations is still unilateral action. We have the concept that we must start the bilateral concept for the ADIS, that's non-unilateral action. So I think that we can establish the ADIS with other country. So and if we go to the current situation in East China Sea, I think the situation is we have to prepare for this. Why we don't bring or we don't propose the regional ADIS for the future with the multilateral or bilateral agreement?
Right.
That's my thought.
All right. Thank you very much, Pak Hadi Susilo, for your explanation. So up to this point, has our government actually tried to talk with the Singapore government and also Malaysian government over ADIS determination?
Yes, I think our government from the foreign ministry, I think, start that discussion about this. With Malaysia, it's for about recent years to make the clear of the jurisdictional boundary of the Malaysia and Indonesia. I think it's a good point because the border in the land and the sea, we can go up to
Right. Yeah.
the airspace border. It's because it is the point for the territorial sovereignty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
think-
because I think what we know now is more about the land and the sea. Sovereignty. We don't know much about the airspace. So I guess your research is will shed a light to many people about airspace security in Indonesia. Right. Okay. So we are still waiting for a question. Maybe the presenters, Pak Hadi Susilo or Pak Lesda and Mbak Nabila, do you have questions or thoughts about other presentations?
Mbak Dila.
Yes.
I actually have a thought. I actually have a bit of question regarding Pak Trio Hadi Susilo's research because
Okay.
pardon me if it's like a silly question because this is something that I literally have no knowledge about that. But one thing that I noted from the presentation itself, one of the conclusion is there is a lack of legal basis. But my question, there is two things, like there is a lack of legal basis, but also there is a inconsistency in practice. So my question towards Pak Rio is that how much important is legal basis? Like, I mean, like a national legal basis when we are talking about something that are directly related to other countries. Even though we have, like, let's say that we have we change the regulation, we have a better legal basis, but it's a national legal basis, like it's a national law that we are we are changing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how much does it make difference? Because like when we are talking about other countries, the other countries can be if they can be have their own law and they can be just like do what they do what they want to do. So like how much important is having a stronger making a stronger law in our behalf? Like how does it how much important does it matter?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you for the question. It's quite a complex question for me, I think. Yes, in my presentation, I highlight this is the lack of the legal basis of the ADIS establishment. It's true because from the previous research from the expert from Buton or previous research about ADIS, that is, there is no just international civil aviation organization is mentioned that ADIS is just a special designated area in airspace. That's all. But for the establishment, this is no document or no convention or a protocol related to ADIS. Every country in the state practice, they describe that determining ADIS is one of the obligation or country self-defense that's stated in the Article 51 UN Charter. So, and also in the, if we go to the theory, for the chopper control theory that's state that for the country has the control and to for the airspace control, full control. So they can determine how the airspace can be determined to the country, especially for the defense. Yes, just like that. So, and your question, sorry, hello?
Yep, hello. Yeah, Pak. We could still hear you.
Yes, okay. from the question is why we don't use our national law, or the country has the national law. We don't use for the legal basis, international legal basis, legal basis. This will be very contradictory, because if we just only use our national legal basis, that we don't will give any respect to the other country.
Yeah. So that is the reason why we should have a multilateral talk or regional talk with other countries, right, Pak Priyo? Because yeah, this is not something that we could easily decide on our own. But yeah, I think it's interesting when there is still no international agreements that specifically elaborate on this AIDS issue.
Yeah, I actually I'm sorry, I think like we lost Pak Priyo, but I think this is remind me of the problem that Indonesia have when we're talking about migrant workers, because
right,
in one hand we're always like again my example is labor law related, because that's the only thing that I know. But like when we're talking about migrant workers, it seems like no matter how good our national law is, if we don't really have like the law, the multilateral talk, or like the multilateral agreement with other countries, it doesn't really matter, because like even though we have a good national law, if our workers who lives abroad are not protected with the agreement between us and the other countries, then it doesn't really matter. So like I can quite imagine that how frustrating it can be if we're only like don't really have like any multilateral agreement between neighborhoods. So thank you, Pak Priyo.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting. Yeah, Pak Priyo, please.
Okay, sorry, I have my connection problem recently. Yes, I want to add one example for this related question. That happened in East China Sea in 2013. They unilaterally declare the Aedes in East China Sea. That out of the territorial airspace. This is in the jurisdictional in East China Sea. That we know, then East China Sea is now is being conflict with 3 nations like Japan, South Korea, and also the surrounding country. China in 2013 unilaterally established the East China Sea Aedes. What is the legal consequences? Because this is not have the other country accept. So
right.
So the other country, when the passing Aedes, they don't want to get the obligation for the China Aedes obligation. As we know, if we pass Aedes, we must to report. But Japan Airlines or other country with the Korean, they won't comply this obligation. So I think if we only we have our own regulation, I think it cannot be done in this situation. I think the Aedes that we established will get the disrespect or obeyed by the other country, I think.
Right. Wow. I think, yeah, that is very interesting how each other's topic actually link, right? We could also talk about that. We could also link that with Pak Lesda's presentation. Pak Lesda, are you still there? Hello? Hello, Pak Lesda.
Yeah. I'm here.
All right. Yeah. So we just talked about multilateral agreement regarding international labor standard regarding ADIS determination. Now let's move about World Trade Organization, Pak. So you explain about several cases that Indonesia become the party of in dispute settlement body regarding the non-discrimination principle, right? So my question is, you see that the Doha development agenda is like, we could say it's like a failure in countries when they want to agree further on trade negotiation. So based on your research, do you think that we could still rely on multilateral negotiation, or probably regional or bilateral agreement will be much better to strengthen our sovereignty?
Okay, thank you.
Especially regarding trade, yeah.
Yes. For me, there are consequences if we have to abandon the multilateral negotiations, because first of all, bilateral or just regional negotiations only give impact to two sides and several sides only. But the multilateral negotiations always have broader impact. If we have to connect it with Doha Development Agenda, well, some said that it was a failure. For me, yeah, it almost become a failure, but we have to see the positive impact too. Like now we are talking about Doha Development Agenda right now. The world trade become more stabilized since the Doha Development Agenda was declared on 2001. Before that, in Indonesia itself, you can see it on my paper later. I also researched about Indonesian export and import data. In brief, our import and export was so bad before the Doha Development Agenda. After that, we have some kind of increased export after the Doha Development Agenda. So my point is, bilateral and regional negotiations have good impact in certain situations.
Right.
But multilateral negotiations will always have a broader impacts for countries, but also have negative consequences. Not all countries in the world will have the ability to comply the resulted negotiations in the multilateral negotiations. That's all.
Right. Thank you very much for your answer, Pak Lesda. Mbak Nabila and Pak Priyo, do you have any questions or thought to Pak Lesda? Okay.
No more.
Yep.
No more. Thank you.
Oh, no more. Okay. So yeah, I think it's very interesting how the different topics brought by Mbak Nabila, by Pak Priyo, and also Pak Lesda, actually the three topics interlink with each other, especially regarding the multilateral aspect, right? But yeah, I think what is more interesting after this multilateral agreement has been concluded is the what do you call it? The penegakan hukum, the what is it? Penegakan hukum, the enforcement of the multilateral agreement, because just like Nabila mentioned, as for the convention that has not been ratified by Indonesia, so it's not binding upon us. So there is no some kind of sanction will be made towards our country, right? So I think that will also have the same effect with the ADIS determination and also things like WTO. But WTO is different because WTO has its own dispute settlement body, right, Pak Lesda? So if there are countries who who are not in conformity with WTO rules, they can be brought before dispute settlement body besides negotiation. So I think from that perspective, yeah, we can say that WTO is much more stronger for its legal enforcement. So are there still any questions? We still have about, we still have several minutes before the end of this session. Okay, if there are no more questions, I think we could, before we end the session, I think each presenter might have like 1 minute concluding remark for your presentation. What are your thoughts about your issue that you would like to share with the world? Because this is live, other people could watch this from YouTube, right? So if there is anything that you would say in 1 minute, the time is yours. Maybe we could start from Mbak Nabila.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Dila. Okay, so as I already mentioned before, when we're talking about this pandemic and the world of work, there are a lot of things that that are affecting the world of work because of this pandemic. For most of us, it doesn't really matter because we have a stable job. We have the job that can be done from home. It's not really affecting us. But for million others in Indonesia, this pandemic has been like a real game changer for them. So I think it's very important for a government to make policies that are not only looking at it's hard to be a government. We all know that, but that's the job. I mean, like the government always said, like, it's hard to be a government, isn't it? But yeah, we know that it's hard, but that's the job. And it's very important for a government to make sure that the policies that are being done right now, it's not hurting them in the long run. Because I agree with what Bu Sri Mulyani stated, that we should not be facing economic versus health in this COVID pandemic, because the economic itself cannot be surviving if the health problem is not done. So in the employment matter, the policies that should be done by the government should not only seen on the economic side, because the economic will crumble if we cannot protect the health and the well-being of the workers itself. And a lot of the workplace clusters, seen that there are still ineffectiveness in the health protocol policies, so there are a lot of homework that needs to be done. So I hope we can like start to think more seriously about this, that what needs to be changing. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mbak Nabila. Next, probably Pak Hadi Susilo. Oh, okay. So probably there's a connection with Pak Hadi Susilo. Then we move to Pak Lesda. Do you have any concluding remark, Pak? Pak, you are still mute. Sorry. Yep.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. I just want to say that many people said that Indonesia should exit the WTO. One of the reasons is the principle of non-discrimination itself. But I would like people to recognize that if principle of non-discrimination is a failure, or even the WTO is a failure, it would be a failure in the first years it was founded. We should see the positive side too. There are a lot of things that's going on in this world that has changed because of WTO and its principles. and Indonesia already threw it all with flying colors. So why should we exit the WTO? Why should we exempt the principles of non-discrimination? That's all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Pak Lesda. Yeah, I think we had a very fruitful discussion this afternoon, despite probably the lack of the participant, but each other could contribute with another's discourse or topic, right? So again, thank you very much for all the presenters. Congratulations for completing your presentation, and we wish you good luck in the future. All right, stay healthy, of course, always. And lastly, maybe before we leave this Zoom meeting, let's have a group picture, right? Okay, it's too bad that Pak Hadi Susilo is not here. All right, 1, 2, 3.
That's Pak Priyo.
Right, Pak Priyo, we have a group picture. Right, yeah. Okay, so I guess we could still hear from Pak Priyo for his concluding remark since he's back. Pak Priyo, we are about to end the session. Everybody has already given their concluding remarks, so I think it's now it's your turn. The time is yours, Pak. Pak, you're still mute. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for moderator from this fruitful discussion this afternoon. I want to short brief for my topic, 1 minute on my conclusion that based on the international legal point of view, the establishment of air defense identification zone doesn't have the written basis. So the inconsistency among the state practice, the ADIS, is still arising until today. So there are fundamental differences among the state practice, US ADIS, Canadian ADIS, Indonesian ADIS, or East China Sea ADIS, and also the other country. So especially the reporting instrument. So the practice of the Indonesian ADIS over a decade, over 2006 until now, is not have the protest or obey with the other country. So I think the existing ADIS, Indonesian ADIS, is established good in from the international law view. So the next point is regarding to the concept of repositioning Indonesian IDs. Several spots potentially lead to the legal issues, especially to the flight information region arrangement with Singapore, and also the previous bilateral agreement with Malaysia. So I think Indonesia must carry out these two potential problems before establishing the new Indonesian ADIS. It is a must for Indonesia as a fast country. So I think it is not enough if ADIS only deploy in the Java Island, like the existing ADIS that I have started in my presentation. So finally, the concept of the non-unilateral ADIS can be carried out for the better future, the regional, in the midst of the situation in the it's not good situation. I think it is good to be carried out for the multilateral agreement that to establish the ADIS. I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Priyo. So I guess that will conclude this afternoon session. Again, thank you very much for all the presenters. We wish you good luck for future endeavor and probably see you around the faculty. All right, bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Mbak Dila and everyone.
Thank you everyone.